welcome to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiaga, and I have a lot of stuff to talk with you guys about here today. The first day of free agency here around the NFL. I have a lot of stories and a lot of breaking news to get to you guys, starting off with something unrelated to football, just something that I saw on the Chip Shot story. Xavier Worthy, what he had to say about Patrick Mahomes and getting a congratulation text from him and alluding to the fact that it could be a match made in heaven for Worthy and the Kansas City Chiefs heading towards the NFL draft. Later on, I'll bring you arguably the biggest news of the day in Russell Wilson signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. That broke out early this morning on Monday around 1 a.m. It was when the notification went out. I'll dive into that. In the second half of the show, I'll bring you the news around the Atlanta Falcons signing Kirk Cousins to a massive deal now that he couldn't agree any contract with the Minnesota Vikings. He goes to Atlanta and starts a new era there with all their young talent. Before I wrap it up in the last segment talking about all the running backs that just flew off the shelves and were signed to different teams. I don't think any running back stayed with any of their teams, so there's going to be a lot of new beginnings, a lot of new experiences with these running backs and these teams. All of that heading into today's episode. But before I dive into the first segment, as always, I want to remind you guys, if you have any questions, want to engage with me during the live show, to please use the tip and donations link you see running across the ticker below me. The tip and donations link is gsmcpodcast.net. Again, it's gsmcpodcast.net. This just makes sure I'm able to see your question pop up live here in the chat next to me on my right. And in doing this, I can see all your questions and I'm able to engage with you guys. It makes the show a lot more fun, especially when we have big topics to talk about like we do today. Again, it's much appreciated every time you guys do that, and it's a big help for not only this show, but all the shows across our network. Now, saying that, I can jump into the first story, the Chip Shot story that has to do more with the NFL draft before I get into all the breaking news. So the first story is on Xavier Worthy, and he obviously was the player now in the record books for setting the new 40-yard dash time at 4.1 seconds. And that created a lot of headlines, a lot of news for him, a lot of good publicity for him, because I mentioned on this show before that I expect him now to kind of creep into early second round, potentially late first round type of prospect with his 40 time. He didn't run any drills or anything like that, but he was able to put that out there on the map, and now he gets people interested. He gets a lot more people looking at him. Now I'm sure a lot more teams are gonna head to his pro day now that they see that he's got record-breaking speed like he showed at the Combine. And recently he went on an interview with USA Today, and he referenced how Patrick Mahomes was one of the people that congratulated him on his record-setting performance. And then he alluded into the fact later on in that conversation that he referenced how Patrick Mahomes used Tyreek Hill in all their 5 years together and how potent of a duo they were there in Kansas City and how important he was to him. And obviously the speed jumps out for both of them. Tyreek Hill, arguably the fastest player in the NFL. Now Xavier Worthy sets this record time. There's going to be comparisons there, especially if he gets drafted there, which now he is in their range sort of. And in that same interview, he went on to say, in his words, "In a perfect world, I would definitely want to go to the Chiefs, just the way Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs improvise and use you. They had Tyreek Hill, the way they use him, I feel like that would be perfect. Like, that would be a perfect fit for me." And, you know, seeing that and saying that first when I saw that quote was, my initial reaction to that was that he was very open about it. You know, he'll talk highly, like any prospect would, about any team that's interested, or if they're asked a question about any team in particular, they're going to say, oh yeah, I would love to go there, this, that, and the other, why this would all work out for me. But with the Chiefs, I think it is different because of where he's supposed to go. He wasn't really getting any attention really in the first round before his 40-yard dash time. Now that he's got that record on there and the Chiefs are in need of a wide receiver, they have Mecole Hardman and Marquez Valdes-Scantling as free agents. They are certainly in need of a wide receiver, and they don't really have a lot of cap space to work out a deal with a big name receiver in free agency like a Calvin Ridley or somebody along those lines. And they're obviously still working out a deal with their star defensive tackle Chris Jones. They might want to get a deal with L'Jarius Sneed done. So all those, I'm sure, take precedent over finding another wide receiver. I'm sure looking at the draft is going to be the way they go. And with Xavier Worthy, I think he could be a great prospect for them because of all the intangibles that he has, similar to Tyreek Hill, and why that would be such a good fit for them. Like I mentioned before, the 40 definitely helped him raise his stock. And now people are looking at him a little bit differently. And just looking at some of his highlights before and after I saw his combine performance, you can kind of see a little bit of, I don't want to say Tyreek Hill, but he has good route running, and he's not just all about the 40, all about the speed, like people might want to say now after setting this record time in the 40. Yeah, he's got that speed, but at the same time, he uses it very well when he's going in and out of his breaks, trying to get open in one-on-one coverage and stuff like that, because he's going to have a lot of that with Travis Kelce out there, getting a lot of attention, a lot of double teams on Travis Kelce. Xavier Worthy, if he were to pair up with Rashee Rice, would be an exciting young duo, and they always get a lot of opportunities, which is why you saw Rashee Rice get a lot of pretty decent games in his first year. He got a lot of experience. You could argue he became their number one receiver. You could say that was him or Mecole Hardman or whoever you might think, but he got a lot more exposure out there to what it was really like being an NFL receiver if instead of going to another team that already had a bunch of receivers and a lot of prominent weapons, that he would be the fourth or third option. The Chiefs were, I guess, unfortunate enough in some instance where they didn't have any great wide receivers, but they were very lucky in that they found a Rashee Rice, and now they're being linked to Xavier Worthy, and they're able to build that up now with younger talent to support Patrick Mahomes. And with these younger receivers, you might question their ability to jump in right away. You know, not everyone is going to be like a Rashee Rice. Well, the only difference is if they were to say to go to, I don't know, the Cardinals, if you want to look at number 4 with Marvin Harrison, there might be doubts around there because he is a rookie. He has to get adjusted to the NFL. But not everyone has Patrick Mahomes as their quarterback. Having him, a Tom Brady, a Peyton Manning, or guys like that, it makes your job so much easier, and it makes you understanding the game a lot more easier than if you were to go in with a rookie quarterback, a guy that has struggled, isn't really near the top of the top. Patrick Mahomes is a generational type of player, is a generational type of quarterback. He understands the game in a very different way than most other quarterbacks do. So getting drafted to that scenario, plus you have Andy Reid, who's arguably the best head coach nowadays in the NFL, or you can make an argument for top 3, top 5 in NFL history. You add that with the type of quarterback that Patrick Mahomes is, a lot of these rookies can just come in and just not really have to think too much because the head coach, the quarterback, make their playing style, make whatever sort of role that they fit into a lot easier than if they were out there with a lot of pressure on them, trying to figure out also their routines, how it all works in the NFL, trying to figure out, you know, what kind of routes to run, where to attack a defensive back. All of that really seamlessly goes away because of how much easier it is to play under Andy Reid with a Patrick Mahomes. It makes you look a lot better and a lot more important to a team when all that pressure is just off of your shoulders. And going deeper into this conversation more on Worthy, you could say, is it worth it to go after Worthy, say in the first round? And to that, I would say, you know, the Chiefs don't really need too much outside of more weapons. They could only really get better if you think about it, because they were already, you could say, the worst team that Patrick Mahomes has had in his time with the Chiefs, offensively at least, because their defense was great, was phenomenal down the stretch there with Steve Spagnuolo head coaching or being the defensive coordinator for that group. And Offensively, it wasn't full of stars. They had Travis Kelce. Isaiah Pacheco was great, but other than that, it was a lot of Patrick Mahomes and making the guys around him better. They only have to get better in that aspect, and it's a lot easier said than done. But they have signed Chris Jones to a deal. They got back one of their linebackers in Drew Tranquill. L'Jarius Sneed is franchise tagged, and if they can't work out a deal, he's the only one that will be lost. But other than that, if you only need one or two positions outside of corner, why would you not just use it in the first round on a receiver like Xavier Worthy that fits a mold that you already know you've had success with? That over the top receiver, that quick, very fast receiver that can get open regardless because of just plain physical, athletic ability in his speed. You already know that's worked before, and there's no guarantees with a rookie like Xavier Worthy, but I think it's worth a shot because you have Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes that cover a lot of blemishes where you might have some, and it won't be a lot because you have other guys on your team like Sky Moore and just receivers like that you could try out and not throw Xavier Worthy into the fire right away. But I think he's good enough where you spend a first round pick on him, and I think he would surprise a lot of people just on his readiness because he was at a school like Texas, a big program with a lot of big time receivers, or not receivers, just players in general that will get drafted early in the draft. All that competition, all that NFL-like experience, I think will translate very well to wherever team he goes to, but in particular the Chiefs because of how ready they are. Everyone's talking about a three-peat already. They're ready to do that. They just need a few pieces here and there to make this team as complete as it ever was and could ever be because of how good they are just overall. And they're young. Their defense is very young. Other than Chris Jones maybe being one of the oldest guys on that team, they are very young, like 26-ish to 25 on average on their team. And overall, Travis Kelce is also the next oldest player other than Patrick Mahomes, I guess. But they're a very young team, and I think a lot of people forget about that. Adding Worthy over some free agents as well. You don't want to go and spend money because, frankly, the Chiefs don't have any. I think Worthy just makes the most sense, low risk, because say if he doesn't work out at all, you still are basically working with the same thing you had last year, and you could try and fill that position with some low-end free agent wide receivers like a Darnell Mooney who's out there, or a Marquise Brown if you want to bring him in from the Cardinals. You could go out and get those guys if you're really not sure, but I think taking a risk on Worthy will pay out a lot better for the Kansas City Chiefs than a lot of people realize, and it always turns out like this, it seems, with the Chiefs. They are drafting at the end of the rounds. A lot of people aren't really paying attention who they draft, and then they turn out to be this all-pro, at least Pro Bowl type of player because of their natural ability, but because they're drafted into such a ready-to-win-now team. That's the biggest thing, at least to me, that I've harped on this show. You have to have the support. You have to have the foundation. If you're a quarterback, receiver, any position, if you're a rookie, to have real success and real impact in the NFL right away. And the players that get drafted late in rounds are often the players that can produce to the best of their abilities right away as soon as they get into the NFL. But regardless of that, I'll leave that conversation there. I'd love to know what you guys think, or if you guys don't think it's worthy, I would love to know what other prospect you think would be perfect for the Chiefs there at the end of the first round. But saying that, it'll bring me to my first break in the show. But I have a lot of NFL news that I want to get into later on the show, from Russell Wilson going to the Steelers, Kirk Cousins signing with the Atlanta Falcons, and all the running backs and where they ended up on the first day of free agency. So don't go anywhere. I'll bring you all those stories right after this break. You're watching the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network.